Hello, everyone. This is Stacy. Welcome to the landing. Hello and welcome back. This week's Oral History Spotlight shines on a very special lady, Miss Mattie Gray Willis. It was recorded in November of 2010 as part of the Cape Lookout National Seashore Connie Mason collection. I am blessed to call Mattie Gray Willis family and to have grown up knowing her. She was never one to skirt the truth, and always one to help you in any way she possibly could. Her heart was tremendous, and so was her love for her faith, her family, and her home. The sound of her voice brought me right back into a great big hug. I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I certainly did.
This is Connie Mason. It is March 31st, Thursday, 2011. We'll be interviewing, this is the second interview with Miss Mattie G. Willis at the Corsound Waterfowl Museum. Make sure my microphone's working nicely now. And this is Miss Mattie Willis. Now, Miss Mattie, tell me your full name.
Mattie Gray Willis.
Willis. Okay. And tell me where you were born.
I was born here at Harkers Island at home. Mother had 4 children. She had the first and last in Beaufort, and the 2 middle ones she had here on the island at home.
Was there a midwife here on the island?
Yeah. Margaret Willis was the one on the west end of the island. Annie Rose was the midwife on the east end.
Uh-huh.
But, they were good. I don't know that they had any training whatsoever. But they were always called, and then moved in the house with the family, usually, if they lived far from where the family was. They would move in like maybe a week before and just be with the family because the mom was kind of not bedridden, but she didn't do a whole lot around the house. Then after the baby came, there were quilts put up to the windows, from what I understand, because the new baby wasn't supposed to have any light on its eyes, you know. They used to put brine liquid in baby's eyes. I don't know if they do that anymore. But the granny woman stayed there, the midwife, and took care of the family and the mom and the baby. And they usually made them stay in bed like 10 days before they let them get up, which was a no-no now.
Oh, yeah.
But my next door neighbor, I remember, we were children, and the next door neighbor, she stayed in bed with one of hers to the 10th day, and her mom let her get up, and she had a cerebral hemorrhage and died.
Oh.
So I don't know if it was right after that or what. When they started letting them get up earlier, they found that was best, you know, to get the blood circulating.
Wow. And you called her a granny?
Some people call them grannies. They were called midwives, I guess.
Midwives, but granny.
Grannies.
Grannies.
But she moved in, took care of the little one until, I don't know, 10 days or whatever, until the mom was able. Of course, they were not allowed to wash clothes and that kind of stuff.
What was the brown liquid that you were talking about? Do you know? Know what that was made of? Was it
Well, that was, I seen that to the hospital.
That's now.
When my babies were coming. I don't know if they used anything, but I know that the bright light was not supposed to be
good for them.
On their eyes. But, and they got very, very little pay, if any. Maybe if the dad worked in the water, I suppose that he would bring seafood to them. And maybe the ones that were in service or whatever, they may have paid them a little bit.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But they did all that for a little bit of nothing. I mean, and it was taking a big risk, you know, Because I know that there was one or two over here that had babies ran in difficulties with, like, coming feet first or stuff like that. And so they, and in doing genealogy, I have found that there was a lot of moms that died at childbirth and all, and now it would be such a simple thing if they were in the hospital or whatever.
Absolutely.
So,
And what was your mom and dad's names?
Daddy's name was Carl Macon Willis.
Macon? M-A-C-O-N?
Mm-hmm. And mom's name was Clara Bell Davis.
Davis. Were they both from the island here, the Harkers Island? How did they meet? I think we talked about that.
I don't know really how they met. Mother was a close friend with Edith Willis. I think she was a Guthrie. And they ran around together. They lived in the same neighborhood. Now, Dad was from the west end of the island. I don't know how he got. I guess they maybe had movies or fudge parties or something, and I think that was the only one that Dad ever dated or Mother.
And your daddy was he a waterman first?
Well, he had to stop school, and so many young people stopped school, especially the men or the boys, to help their dads. The dads not many had big boats. They just had little open boats, and they went crabbing or clamming or whatever. And when the boys got old enough, they went with their dads. I remember one time my granddaddy left my daddy on a little island or whatever you called it and came home. And that night he realized that he had left. And I remember Daddy saying that he yelled and yelled and yelled, but the wind was blowing in the opposite direction. So finally he realized, and he waded off to see if he could swim to the island from that little, because it wasn't, and he realized that the water got too deep, so he went back to the little island. When Granddaddy realized what he had done, and Daddy said talking about lavishing somebody with love, he did it. But the little boys did. They had to quit. Most of them quit work.
But they finally found
The tide was getting high, but
he was losing ground.
Yeah. So, but I find that every once in a while somebody will say that they did that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And if you had 2 or 3 people with you, and you were out pulling your nest when you got the boat, whatever, if it was clams or crabs, whatever, you just took off and you didn't check.
So and he eventually joined the service?
He joined the Coast Guard when he lied. There was 6 guys from here on the island, and they got together. And he used to talk about how they would go to churches when they were having a revival, and they would go to the altar just to see the preacher if it was a woman. But he said that they just were sitting around one evening in the summertime to the landing, and one of them said, "Let's go to the Coast Guard." And they just took off, 6 of them, I think. There was Alan Lewis and Walter Lewis and a big bunch of them. They went, and all of them lied. And they all joined the Coast Guard. And I don't know if they even had boot camp or where the training, whatever. But Daddy loved to reminisce when we were little. But we should have kept right on questioning, when they got older. They could have told us so much.
Oh, yeah. Well, hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah.
A lot of people had that regret.
But he went in the Coast Guard and he stayed for 27 years and regretted getting out.
And about what year was that? Doesn't have to be exact, but about
When he got out?
When he got in, when he went in.
I don't know.
But it was before World War II.
Well, yeah, my goodness, yes. It had to be. He was in the service a long time. I was born in 1931, and he was at Fort Macon then.
Mm-hmm. So
he had been in for years before that. My oldest brother was born in 1929. He was in the service then.
So
I don't know. He was probably. I can look in my records at home and see, but he was probably in the Coast Guard when he got married. I don't know for sure.
Mm-hmm. And you told me that part of the duties of the Coast Guardsman was to patrol the beach, and you went on patrol with them, didn't you?
Every evening after they got the boat houses and everything cleaned down and got supper, they took their little things. They had a belt thing with things hanging on. I don't know what all.
Like a utility
And
belt.
we would start walking, and we would have so much fun when we would go toward Atlantic Beach. I guess that's the west. And they had time clocks to the end, and they had to, we would run and play in the waves and so forth. And Daddy was always checking to see, if there was any signs of boats that come on the beach or anything. And when we got way down on Mustang Atlantic Beach, he'd hit that clock and make a record of it.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'd head on. And it was the far piece. I don't know how far it is from Atlantic Beach to Fort Macon. But we had such fun. We would play in the hills, and Daddy would play with us, and we just enjoyed it.
These were on the good nights, calm days, beautiful
When
days.
it was bad, of course, he wouldn't let us go because if it was stormy, the waves would come almost to the dunes.
That was dangerous. Yeah.
Now, I suppose, if they had to do that, they would probably use a Jeep or a truck or something.
Yeah. Was he ever stationed at Cape Lookout?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And that was fun, too. I mean, every evening he would take us in the Coast Guard truck, and we would go to Corbanks, because they had a station at Corbanks then. And he'd go down there to take the mail and supplies or whatever.
Now, you told me something last time we talked about there were no girls allowed in the station. Is that right?
I don't know. All I remember about the state was being on the porch, because they had long porches. And in the, the room where they had the pool tables and tennis tables and all that. We'd go there every afternoon. Recreational place. That was kind of a little building off from the station. It was attached, but it wasn't. But I don't ever remember hardly going in the station at all. Of course, the little cook shed place was off from the station. But whenever there was a storm or something and they had people come in, they would evacuate the houses and we would go. But we weren't allowed all over. I mean, you just didn't go wandering. Of course, Daddy he was the chief over there.
He was the chief. Okay.
We would go like in the kitchen then or wherever we needed to be, but we're not allowed just to run rampant,
Now, as the chief's family, where did you live?
There's little cottages over there. Mm-hmm. And there was one, Uncle David and a lot of guys that went over there with their families. But we would stay weeks and weeks over there. And I think now...
is that cottage still there?
I don't know. The last time I went, I didn't go any further than the lighthouse.
Well,
it was so little area. When you're little, I guess things look bigger, but to us we would walk from the station to the lighthouse every morning and play. The Coast Guard had a little dock by the lighthouse, and the Army dock was on the other end, Mm-hmm. But I would take off mornings by myself and walk to the gun mines when the war. We weren't allowed over there during the war, but after the war. And the gun mines were in the middle of the island, we called it. Now they're out in the ocean.
Yeah.
So it's washed away quite a bit.
Do you remember when the gun mounts were moved into place?
No, we weren't allowed over there, I don't think.
At that time?
I think once the war started and there was so much turmoil. Even though as a child I wasn't a child, I was 13 when the war started. You got in their way and stuff. And there was always jeeps and trucks going and coming and stuff. So I don't know if we were banned, if the public was banned from over there or what. But I do remember that it was kind of you didn't even think of being in a little boat over that way.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And then when it really got rough, and the boats were being bombed, or the submarines or whatever. I know that we went over there just about every Sunday evening to watch the ships burn or whatever.
Really?
And to pick up like K-rations and paint and stuff that was on the beach. It seems to me that you would have been banned from that. I mean, I don't know that anybody were allowed to go in the waves or swimming or anything. I don't remember that. But I do remember of walking along the beach and picking up those kinds of things. But we would just about every Sunday and just sit on the hills and watch I don't know if there were ever. Probably there had been bodies picked up over there, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember other people telling me about finding bodies. That had to be a very unpleasant.
I didn't know if the fishing boats were even allowed out there. I don't know. It's probably like zoned off or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because that would have been a mess too if they were out there fishing. And because I remember those tankers, those big boats, they were close to shore burning. It seems like.
Yeah, and all that was classified. The rest of the nation did not know that was happening.
Didn't they?
Off our coast.
Now I don't remember if there was any that way, core banks that way or not.
Yeah, they had some too. Yeah. But it was all classified, and the people like Raleigh, they didn't even know things like that were happening.
I think now
they couldn't keep it a secret now, because
I remember the army trucks being over here with groups of, I guess, men. I don't know how many they would bring, but they'd go over there. And I guess they patrol the beaches. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember how we had to cover our windows, and we'd go upstairs when it started getting dark and be like, Anne Frank, they had that. It was sort of like that. You weren't allowed to have it. We had little tiny candles burning, but we weren't allowed to have bright lights. Really.
You had to cover your windows.
Even the cars that went down the road had to have tape over their lights, just a little tiny slit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was scary, but I suppose now it would be even scarier.
Now, your father had to go overseas too, didn't he?
He went overseas for 2 years.
And what was his job?
He drove one of the landing crafts that went to carry the troops to the beaches, which was very dangerous. And we then didn't realize how serious things were. After he came home, I think I might have told you this before, he would try to tell us things that happened to him, and we laughed about it and thought it was, But then later on, and I think about it now, he said that when they were taking the troops to the beach, see, all the fire was coming toward them. The Japanese were firing at them. And how dangerous it was. And he said before they get to the beach to put the landing thing down for the troops to go off, the Japanese would be firing right at them. So they'd stop way before they got to the beach, and they sometimes had to push these little young guys overboard, And it would be over their heads, and they would have to push them. And how heartbreaking that was. There's little teenagers, it seemed like. And they'd beg for your helmet if they had lost theirs overboard or something. And then they'd have to turn around and go get another group and carry them back. So it was and how they had when they got, because at the time he was over there, I didn't know if it was in the Philippines, how they would have to, if they got damages to their boat, because they had the kamikaze then, or whatever you call it, and they would try to crash in the boats, the ships. But how they'd have to shoot if an airplane, a Japanese, whatever, crashed near the boats, the troops, they're going to try to swim to the closest. They would try to get close to the ship, and they'd shoot them before. They weren't allowed to take them as prisoners because they didn't have room.
Oh, wow.
So
it was a hard time, wasn't it?
It was. Mm. And I don't think at the time it was such a quick thing if they had time to even think.
Yeah.
Because their daddy's ship was in Norfolk being done over, whatever you call it. And when they got the call, because they had to come all the way around here, Florida and all that, to get to California where they were shipping out.
So they had to go through the Panama Canal?
Mm-hmm. He bought souvenirs home. But Fort Macon Coast Guard over there called Mother and the families of the boys that were on the ships. They were coming a convoy, and said to be to Fort Macon by like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, whatever. So all the women over here that had children, they tried to get carloads, and we stood on the beach and we saw the outline. It was like a shadow way off. And we still didn't know what was happening. All of a sudden, these barges started coming ashore, and it was the guys that had families on the beach, which they couldn't stay but like half an hour or whatever. But at least they were kind enough to let them do that.
That was great, yeah.
So then we went on home, and the ships took off, and we didn't hear any more till they got to California. And most of the letters the guys wrote home had to be censored, so they couldn't write, certain things.
Yeah, I bet the person who had the censor who had to read all those letters, that must have been something.
And anything, I mean, they didn't miss a thing if they put anything in those letters. It was back that.
But after he got out after the war was over, did he go back and he was still in the service?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Let's see, I think they came home on a train. And we didn't know they were coming. I was to my aunt's house having dinner that Sunday, and we were out in the yard playing, and Aunt Blanche came running, "Get your things together, we've got to go to your house. Your daddy's on his way home." And when we got home, because we had to walk, we got home and Daddy was there, and all of the neighborhood had gathered. It was a big thing. Now I don't know if the servicemen get any recognition, but he was like a hero. And I remember he went to the store a day or two after that. And an old woman that was here, she came in, Aunt Lady. She said, "Carl, you stay home all the time. Every time I come to this store, you're here." And it had been 2 years since he had been home. He was kind of insulted that it hadn't been missed.
In 2 years, he hadn't been missed.
Yeah.
Well, that would be discouraging.
He did tell the most things about how the prisoners, do you care if I?
No, I'd love for you to tell that.
How the prisoners, they would have them in like pig pen or something. And he, because Daddy was a very emotional person, but he would tell about how he would walk along the edge and those guys would cry, wanted to tell somebody about their situation, the ones that were in the prisoners, Japanese, most of them, and how they'd cry and tell about how they were forced. They were young men, like the Army had draft here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he said they would cry and say they didn't want to be in the war and all that stuff, and now here they are as prisoners. I don't know whatever happened to the prisoners.
Well, eventually they were let go. I mean, there wasn't any big war crimes trials like there were in Germany for the Japanese that I'm aware of.
And then he would talk sometime and cry about how humble and good the people in the Samoan Islands, and the different islands they went to, how good the people were and how good the Coast Guard or the servicemen were treated. Mm-hmm. I know he was trying to find somebody that was a member of his church because he wanted to go to Sunday school if there was. So he went down the beach one day singing a song that's in our church hymnals. And an old man came up to him and said, "That's my song." So he took him.
Do you remember what song it was?
I think it was "Come, Come, You Saints." I'm not sure. But, I've often heard that if you're anywhere like that and you're in a strange place, to hum a song or something and they would recognize you. Mm-hmm. But he said the Samoan people were the best people on earth.
And his religion was Mormon?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But he said that, and I've often heard that the Samoan, they call them now Samoan Americans. But, he enjoyed it. He said that the New Zealand people were real good too. Mm-hmm. They brought pictures home. And most of them were older people.
So he came back home to a hero's welcome. And now, when did he meet your mother? Was it after? I mean, he was married before he went to war.
Oh yeah.
And so when he came back home, now they had all their children by then?
Oh yeah. No. Well, yeah. Miles was the youngest. He was born in 1940.
So that was before
Daddy left. He wasn't even walking, and he had to pull off and leave Mother with all those children. And see, it happened so quickly, like I said before, that they didn't have time to make plans or arrangements. Mm-hmm. Left Mother with 4. I guess that she continued to get his pay. I suppose she did. But it was kind of hard, and everything was rationing during the war. I mean, you only got a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Where were you living?
Same place on the west end of the island.
On the west end of Harkers Island?
They had a big home, and grandmother lived not too far from. So she helped Mother a lot and take care of the little one.
Is that home still there today? and it would be right before the sharp curve. Is that when you're coming
Coming or going?
When you're coming on the island.
Yeah, it's just before you hit the sharp curve.
And it's on the
left-hand side. Now, grandmother's house was around where the new housing, all that stuff is. We called that the fresh. What was that called then? I can't remember. She had an old big house, but Granddaddy had died then, so she was by herself. So, and we had lamp lights and that kind of street lights.
What would be your favorite type of meal that your mom would fix for you?
Stewed chicken.
Stewed chicken.
And grandmother would go out every Saturday evening and kill the chicken, wring its neck, and it would finally die.
Oh.
And they didn't have any ice box, so nobody had. You had to deliver the ice here. By the time you got it from over here, it was melted. That was the only time you had like Jell-O or something cold.
So stewed chicken, what would she put in it? Anything? Or?
She just had Dodgers and dumplings, and we'd always have stewed chicken, potato salad. And the beans, most of the beans we got like green beans, whatever canned.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, but they canned all summer.
Yeah.
The women did.
What kind of things did they can?
They canned everything before they kind of stopped canning when everything got more.
Yeah, manufactured.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
And there was people over here that had gardens, but everything they got, they canned. Just before it stopped, the people canning so much. The last thing they were going to try were collards.
Oh, canning collards.
I remember Helen Lewis and a bunch got together and said, we'll try those. And I never did find out how they were. I reckon Helen's is still up. I know when Mother died, she still had canned figs and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Right on that until she got old.
I had the privilege of talking to David Yeomans' wife.
Clara?
Yeah, many years ago. And after I talked with her, she gave me a thing of homemade canned figs. And I still have them.
David?
I never opened them. I said, that is precious to me.
David, Mother had a little sugar fig tree.
Oh, I love those little sugars.
And they cooked those whole, and they put a slice of lemon in them, or orange. And they were so pretty, but they were good in the wintertime with a hot white roll. Mm. Now, some of the bigger figs, you cut them in pieces, but it took so much sugar.
Well, I know now there was a fig recipe from Portsmouth that was kind of unusual because the woman who told me this, she said they had those big figs. I guess they were turkey figs or something. They were purple. She said they had to milk the figs first. They had so much latex in them or white sap in them. You know, when you cut a fig, sometimes that out of the stem.
Oh, most of that is in the stem, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And she says that they had to milk them first, get the milk out of them.
I've never heard that.
I hadn't either.
I cut it and just peel it off.
Right.
But they had pears, which were delicious. Those white pears, because everybody just about had pear trees and stuff. You know, I remember an old lady telling me one time that we know that Harkers Island and Straits, that was all one. It was all one land thing. Anyway, that because Straits could grow such pretty gardens, people on the island didn't. I mean, they had little gardens. But they said if Harkers Island and Straits was all one, the property on the back side of the island ought to be as rich and good for planting as Straits. So, and they found out that, especially on the west end of the island, they grew pretty collards and stuff. Mm-hmm. So, but I don't know. They, like I said, anything they thought they could can, they would try.
Right.
I don't know if they ever tried like shrimp or anything like that. I don't know if any kind of seafood would be cannibal.
Usually they salted the fish.
Yeah, Mother always had.
Fish?
I never ate any, but they always had. They called it a lard can. It was cans that the stores had. That when the groceries were brought to the stores, they bought it all in one big can. You know, the molasses or that came in tubs or whatever. But they would save the cans for the people that wanted them. And Mother and most of the people used those cans to salt their fish.
Oh, okay.
And they used them until the salt rusted them out or whatever. But I remember Mother fixing them all the time. Sometimes she'd boil them, and sometimes she would put them in the oven. And
This is after they came out of the tub.
Yeah, you took them out and let them dry or whatever. And they had the fish roe. I love those.
So you like mullet roe?
Oh, yeah. The little ones I don't like great. But see, when I was little, they didn't cook them fresh like I want them now. They always dried them out, put them in the sun between two boards. Outdoors, I don't know why they didn't die of some diseases. Of course, there was insects flying around. But I never heard of anybody cooking one raw, we call it. Now, if I get one, I put it in the freezer, and if I want it, I'll take it out and wash it, salt it, and let it sit for a while and eat it. But all I ever saw were the dark-colored ones they dried.
Well, there's that man to Betty with the collared shack. He has dried fish roe.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I buy some because I put one on my dad's grave. I think I told you that before, and because he loved it so good.
Now your daddy was from
Stacy.
I still say down east, but
yeah. And so, but I never acquired a taste for it. But boy, he loved it. I would eat
those. Ooh, my grandmother used to cook those whenever she knew that Mother was coming. That was part of supper. But I love the other kind, but I only want one little piece. I don't want a lot of it.
Yeah. You told me about a chocolate cake that made my mouth water the last time we talked. Tell me about that again.
I don't know. There are a lot of people that still cling to the old recipes, which I had rather. There's a chocolate cake, and some make 6 layers, some make 8 layers, little tiny ones. Mother always made the little ones, and she made her fudge frosting, they called it. And you could hear it crack in the head of the knife when she cut it. But they made jelly cake, which was in a tub. It wasn't like the jelly you get now. No taste whatsoever like it used to be. And banana cake and pineapple cake. But they didn't make them right. They make them right. Everything now I call it artificial. Mother would work all day Saturday fixing that cake. But it was made from scratch. There was no bought cake mix or icing and all that stuff. They made it right. And I remember coming up, if we made mashed potatoes or whatever.
About making mashed potatoes now.
We didn't have butter. It was white. We get it white. And there was a little bubble in it, a little peel, we called it. And you smash that with yellow coloring. And I always smashed it with a fork, and I'd mix that yellow in with it. But there was no yellow butter. It was white. It looked awful.
It was margarine.
Well, yeah, sorry. It looked just like
And Daddy called it axle grease.
Until you got it colored, nobody dared eat it because it was white. Now, because Daddy was in the Coast Guard, we fared a little bit better because Daddy would, stuff that they would throw out or were going to, Daddy would bring home, which is perfectly good. That because they had an abundance of it, Daddy would say, I'm going to take some of this home. So we fared a little bit better. But it was, and we always had one night Mother made fudge. We didn't have, like I think I told you before, Daddy always said you were supposed to eat 8, 12, and 5, whether you were hungry or not. He died believing that. And I did to a certain extent and tried to hold on to that heritage until my children were in high school. But then I said, Daddy, the thing is now I've got a daughter in basketball practice. I've got a boy in football practice. I've got a boy at East Carver and a girl. You can't do the things that he grew up with and we grew up with as children. And it was sad because the families got tore out back then. But we didn't have potato chips and popcorn. If you had popcorn, I don't remember even having popcorn when we were little. But so there was no snacking in between, and you could eat because you're starved by 12. You know,
That's
you
right.
can't run into the house if you were to the shore. You know, because you were hungry.
Because you were hungry. Well, now tell me about your husband.
What about him?
Well, just his name and when you met. And
His name was Louis Willis. Everybody called him Blackie. He was almost next door neighbor, and we grew up together. We played together and everything. But I didn't even recognize him as somebody else. He was part of the family almost. Until I was out of high school. I was walking home from the movies one night, and he stopped. He was in the Coast Guard then. He said, "Hey, sweetie," or something like that. He "You want to ride home?" And I got in the car with him, and he asked me for a date that night. We had known each other all our lives, but since he had been gone, I saw a picture of Chickamaucomico Coast Guard base. I guess it was down around Oak somewhere down that way.
Avon.
Last night, wasn't it? And I said, how in the world did he ever learn to spell that? That's a long word. But we started dating, and he stayed in for his 4 years, and I begged him to stay. Of course, he was a buoy jumper, which was kind of dangerous.
Oh.
They'd go up to the side of a buoy, and he'd have to jump it to get on the buoy.
Oh.
And they would take off and leave. The ship would, the Conifer or whatever boat he was on. They'd take off and just leave him on the buoy to make repairs or do whatever. And one day they came to pick him up, and it was real rough, and the ship hit him on his knee and kind of busted it anyway.
Oh.
He went through life with a kind of a hurt knee. They'd have to put needles in and draw the fluid out. Mm. But I wanted him to stay in because Coast Guard had always been in my family. Every man in my family, Daddy's family, Mother's family, had been Coast Guard. And retired, most of them. But his mom was hell-bent. She was going to get him out. So he got out, but after 6 months, he was sorry he got out. Because if you weren't a fisherman back then, you were nothing.
Mm-hmm. Did he turn to fishing when he got out of the Coast
No,
Guard?
he went to work for House of Paul in Beaufort.
House of Paul. Mm-hmm.
And he worked with him and did his, what you call it, they like schooling thing. What was it called? Anyway, he got paid a little check for.
Let's see. He had a metal place, right? Turned metal. House of Paul did.
No, it's car repair. Well,
car repair. Yeah.
It was down there where Beaufort. Rick. So I don't know. It's the drugstore that's down the street.
Bell's Drug. It's close to that. Yeah. So it was on the water side of the.
Yeah, he was right next to Woodard. See the dentist. Woodard's house was next.
Woodard was across the street, I think.
House of Paul place, the
right.
part where the men worked was across the street.
Oh, okay, where the Maritime Museum is now. Mm-hmm.
So he stayed there, and then Dick Parker found out about him, and he wanted him, so he went to work with Dick when the shop was way down where almost to the, what do you call it, where the ships come in?
The port?
Way down there, Dick Parker had the shop, and then they moved. So he stayed with him for 21 years, I think. We got a chance to go on the ferry as a mechanic, a diesel mechanic.
So he worked for the ferry system the last part of his
career?
career?
He was there when he had retired. He wanted to retire. He said, there's so much I want to do. Well, they begged him to stay in. And he said, he came home one evening, he said, hon, I want to get out. It was 60, he was 62. He would have gotten $32 more a month. He said, what should I do? I said, well, get out. You know, we're getting up in age. So he got out, and in 2 weeks he had done everything he wanted to do. And then he was bored to death. He said, what am I going to do now? I said, well, I don't know. So he had been out 1 year and 2 months when he died.
Oh.
So had he stayed in that, if he had passed away within that years, I would have been fixed. But because he stayed in 2 months too long, I said I could have killed him.
Well, how many children did you have with Blackie?
4.
And tell me about them.
Well, Wendy was the oldest. All of them. All of them had been married. Kyle, the last one, had just gotten married when Blackie died. Mm. So he got to see most of the grandchildren. I think there was only been 2 or 3. I've got 8 and 2 great-grandchildren.
Wonderful.
And he got to see them all and play with them, enjoy them, except I think the 2 great-grandchildren and maybe one of the grandchildren.
If you had your grandchildren or one of your grandchildren on your knee and you wanted to tell them a tale about Harkers Island and growing up here, what would you tell them? Something.
Well, all of them, but especially my son. He is like me. I keep every clipping. I have got plastic containers full of newspaper clippings from when, way, when it was what did they call it? It wasn't the Beaufort News. It was before that. I mean, way back there.
The Eagle?
I don't remember, but I have got boxes of clippings of obituaries and all kinds of things.
Wow.
But my son is the one that is like me. He wants to know. He'll say, Mama, tell me about the olden days. And I don't know if I might have one grandchild that he wants me to tell him about that. But I kind of shoo him away, not realizing that that's all they'll ever know. I mean, it's what I tell them.
That's right.
So I try to tell them how we didn't know any difference, Connie, because everybody fared alike. Everybody was poor, but we didn't know it. As a matter of fact, I don't think we were poor. We were rich in the things that we had. We had what we needed. So what if we got our homework by lamplight? It was good. I mean, we enjoyed it. We walked to school on the shore. What difference did it make? We got there and got back, and we enjoyed. Now I can carry those memories with me. It's sad that my children won't ever know. The joy of running home, playing on the shore under the net spreads and all that kind of stuff. That now nobody, you can think what it might have been like, but you'll never know.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we had camcorders or whatever you call them, you still wouldn't have smelt that air blowing and stuff like that and seeing the rain come across the water. I was thinking the other night how we used to load the boat, a boat. We didn't have a boat, but our neighbors did. And we'd pile in that boat and go over to Shackelford Banks. And coming home by the moonlight, of course the boats weren't fast, we'd make ice cream sitting on the cab and singing and everything. And it was just a good time. Good time.
Mm.
I hate for people talking about they weren't golden years, were they? Yes, they were. I thought they were. And they're still, I think, now. I'd like to have it over again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we would go to school, and Mother would take the little ones that were left. And she always had a carriage, and she would walk if there was one or two, to Grandma's house, which was down by the school building. And then we would go there after school and play until dark, and then we'd walk home in the pitch black because there was no street lights. You see a little lamp way through the woods. And the road until I got, I reckon almost in high school, were like clamshells. I mean, it was rocks, the roads were. I remember the evening they started paving the road. We were walking home, and we were on the opposite side of the road, and we walked way, and they wouldn't let us cross because they had poured the, whatever you call it. I don't know if they called it asphalt then. But we had to walk way back and cross the road to go to the other side to get home. But all those things, I can remember when the ferry was running and when the bridge was over here. And I walked to the Straits 8 years to take piano lessons.
You walked to the Straits?
Across the bridge.
You walked across the bridge.
Learned how to play chopsticks. Now I couldn't play that anymore.
You're so accomplished like me. I took 7 years and I can't play anything but
now they want me a piano, but I knew where middle C was.
Oh,
but I couldn't walk. I bet I couldn't walk halfway the island now. I mean, we walked to Shell Point. We'd leave school and we'd go to Shell Point, which was very seldom because that was the Easter. You didn't go away. That was far. But we would go down there occasionally and have a hot dog roast to Shell Point. Because most of our friends were from down that way. Claire Estelle and Annie Brown, all them.
Did you know why it was called Shell Point at that time?
Yeah.
Tell me for the record what.
I mean, I remember I asked my uncle just before he passed away in 1994, 95. Lillian Davis, wrote all these, and I've got every one of them, things about the island. And he said, there's one thing that she didn't write about. And I said, well, he lived in Shelby. He'd come home every summer. And he was home, his wife had died, and we were just sitting in the swing talking. And he said she didn't write about the why it was Shell Point. I often wondered if the Indians had enough shells to try to build a road to the banks. Where did they get all those shells? He said that they had great big mounds of shells. They were so big, the mounds were, that the little boys would have caves inside. They would dig them out and they'd go in, like a big cave. And they would play and enjoy. And then there would be barges come in and pick them up, the shells, and take them off. And also he said that they had seemed like to me it was, I don't know where they would have gotten logs. There was something else that he said that the ships or the big boats would come in, or the barges would come in and pick it up and take it to Norfolk or somewhere. I don't know if that could have been trees. I mean, they didn't have logging. I also didn't know that down beyond where my house is at, do you know where Madge lives? Lived? Well, there was a big field back there. Of course, it's called 9 houses are built over it. But they had, I believe she said, rice. Couldn't have been wheat. Could have been. But they had a windmill and all that mess there where the boat harbor is now by the bridge up that way. Mm-hmm. And he talked about that stuff, which was beyond what I never heard that.
It was, I think it was corn. What they ground in the windmill was corn.
Was it?
But it could, I mean, I'm not to say because I don't know, but, this is a great place to do rice too, with the flooding and everything. But Joel Hancock had told me about over there where the Maxwell land is over there, that's where that windmill was.
Well, no, by the time I got up where I was old enough to wander, I used to, because grandmother would walk along the shore with a bushel, sacks. And she'd walk, and we would walk across that, where the harbor is now. You could walk across that. And she'd go in Tom Sparks' creek, they called it, and get oysters and put them on her back and tote them all the way down all those, along the shore. But I don't ever remember seeing a windmill or anything like that.
Yeah, it was
probably gone by then.
But the stones are still there, so Joel tells me. And I've asked permission to go over there and find them and photograph them and measure them and everything.
Who would you contact?
The Maxwells, because they own that property now.
Well, don't Connie Willis's wife still, isn't she the caretaker there?
I don't know, but
Judy?
Karen's going to find out. I mean, she's going to
contact her. I know Judy would probably let you do it.
So Karen's going to get me the permission to go over there.
Now, I remember when Mr. Johnson was he was the what do you call people to take care of other people's property?
Caretaker.
He drove the school bus,
Caretaker.
Mr. Johnson did, and he had a son, Ella Johnson. I don't know what she is now. She lives over there to Smyrna. Mm-hmm. What was her husband? Umpy, what was his name?
Umpy?
But we would go over there to play, but that inn, the very inn, we called it, what did we call it? But it was like off limits to us. That was where the pilgrims, they said, was supposed to have landed or something. There was a half-sunken great big boat down there and all that.
Oh, really? On Harkers Island? On
the point.
On the point where
the dentist is.
I'm not sure where I know.
Well, that's probably the same thing you're talking about, Joel. It's the same area.
Mm-hmm.
We called it, what do we call it? The Plymouth something. Anyway, there was a big hull of a boat there that the water would wash up in it, And it finally rotted down. I guess the dentists destroyed it because there was 2 or 3 great big millionaires that bought it, I think, before Dennis got it. I don't remember. Mm-hmm. Had a lot of changes. That's the reason I tell the crowd that I said the islanders don't come here to our museum because they think it's always going to be here, but it don't always happen that way. I've always been interested in my forefathers and what they did, especially my grandfather, great-grandfather, or whoever being from Ireland. I've always wondered, do I have cousins in Ireland? But because he came here the way he did, there's no county or anything that I could ever find any information.
How did he come here?
Grandmother always told me that he came on a freighter from Ireland, and the ship landed in Wilmington, and he got off. It was like a stowaway. And he wandered from Wilmington because the women here, and I guess other communities, went where they were building roads to do the cooking and the washing for the men. Mm-hmm. They weren't married, but they weren't concubines either. They just went, I guess the county.
They were making a living.
Yeah. But I remember her talking about when they were up around, they didn't call it Jacksonville or Small. I don't know, but we used to call it Bear Creek. It was up that way, and it was communities out off the main highway. We used to go up to visit. We had companies of yeomen's families, were my family's grandmother days. Well, yeoman she was. But he was helping to build. He was on the road crew, So he and Lucy, or no, Jean, their house was up where Tom Sparks' house is now. Mm-hmm. That's where they lived. But I remember Uncle Guy, the one I was telling you about earlier. He told me about grandmother. They would come up. The sawmills were at Lennoxville, that way, and they washed and fed the men. There were big groups of them that went with the road crew. So I guess that's where he just migrated on down. And
so he met her during that time.
Yeah.
And stayed on Harkers Island.
Yep.
And what was his name?
Timothy
Sullivan. Sullivan. Good old Irish
name. So if that ain't Irish
name. You can't get any more Irish than that.
No more Irish than that. Daddy died wanting to know if I just knew for sure, what was what. But.
Well, now, as a Mormon, I would have thought that you would try to do that. Right?
How have we done it? We've done everything. The only thing that we have traced went to Wilmington. We even found a house, and the John Sullivan that we have found in the records there. He and his wife was named Lucy. No, it was Lucy. Which we think that maybe when they had grandmother Lucy, that they named her for her. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But there's just no way of proving. And grandmother said that she was the oldest of three girls. They lived up there where Tom's house is. She was the oldest and she was only 8. Well, see, they didn't keep records. And even the Bible said just had birthday and death date. They didn't write nothing, Well, I call her grandmother, Jane, Mama's mother. Mama was 8, and she had to go clamming, because they didn't have no welfare and all that stuff. You couldn't get it off the land, you didn't get it. She would fill her little skiff. She had a little skiff, and she would pole. That's the reason the grandmother used to talk about how narrow that stretch of water was, where the bridge is now. She'd pole her little skiff across that little inlet, that little strip of water, to stretch and tote the clams to a little place up the road there where they bought seafood. That was and if you didn't, of course, they always had gardens up there. Tom Sparks said that he always had big gardens. But you had to get the stuff out of the water if you lived. Mm-hmm. I had it was Papa Joe, Daddy's father. One of his sisters, her husband died with severe arthritis or something. They lived to Shackelford Banks. And she had like 7 or 8 children. And she was sickly herself all the time. That she writes, I've got it in my history stuff, that she had to wrap her children in the sailboat canvases to keep them warm. They just didn't have anything.
She took them out of the boats and put the canvases in the house and
carried the canvases in the house to wrap the
And
children.
wrap
They
children.
didn't have nothing.
Mm.
And like I said, if you didn't have a little collar patch or something. And I remember when I read Karen's first mailboat book about Aunt Mary, so she was my family too. And how they went, Christmas was coming, and how they'd go in the woods, the little boys would, and pull the wool off the briars where the lambs had, or sheep had been. So the moms could do little things to make little toys or clothes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But
Socks.
it was rough.
Mm.
But they died before they realized that there was an easier way.
Mm.
So
We've got it pretty good, don't we?
I think we've got it made in the shade.
Well, listen, I want to thank you so much. I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours.
That's like the little boy just came home off his mission.
Yeah.
Lisa's boy. Lisa told me before he came in, she had talked to him on the internet, whatever, and she said, Jordan, what do you want when you get home? She thought he'd say shrimp or whatever. He said, Ma, I want to go to my bedroom, lock the door, and sleep for 24 hours straight. I mean, they have it rough. In Mexico, it's rough. He said, and I don't want to ever see another tomato in my life.
He has no tomatoes.
So, I mean,
salsa.
There's poor places still in the world.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we don't know how good we have it, but I want to thank you again. And
if my children ever want a history, I'll send you.
Send them here, and and that's the wonderful thing about these tapes. Between the park and the Corsound Museum, we'll digitize these. They'll be available to everybody. So,
well, what I started to say just now before I drifted off on something else, I tell the people, take your children. If they're older, send their children with their children to the museum. I said, because everything down there is something that belonged to a relative centuries ago, I reckon.
Yeah.
But they didn't know what to do with it, so they put it down there for safekeeping. I mean, and if you've got sense enough to realize that was your great-great-great-grandfather's, and his fingers touched that. I look at things back there, and I've never been all over it, but I go back there and think about their hands have been on that piece of equipment, crippled hands. Like Stacy Guthrie, he was my husband's family.
Mm-hmm.
And you've not got sense enough, you're letting it lay there. And I want pictures of my children with that stuff.
Right.
So.
Tell us again what you were talking about. Shackelford Banks.
We went over there, and our mamas and daddies, we all went to the shore. See, you anchored your bigger boat, and then you went in your little skiff to the shore. But when it started getting, the moon started coming out, they started yelling for us. We were all over the shore. He had a big family. Well, there was three of us, and he had, I think, 4. But we got on the boat, and Mother and Daddy and Walter and Neitha, his daughter, they started doing ice cream. It took so long with the boat, because they weren't fast, that we ate ice cream coming home, and it was a crank, one of those old-timey cranks. It was banana ice cream, and it was so good. But I remember when we were little, when school got out, Mother would walk after she got the children off to school and got the washing out and all that stuff. I don't know how women did so much with so little to work with.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have no washing machines and all that. But I'd come home from school, even they would hang sheets and all that stuff. Plus keeping the house. And I never knew where my bed was going to be because she changed furniture around every day. I don't know how she did it, but she did it. Anyway, Mother would do all that, and then she'd walk to her mom's, which I told you how far it was from her house.
Which that's about mid-island, and you were on the western island, so it was about 2.5 miles, probably.
Well, see, it seemed like the island I know has washed away tremendously, because I would walk my dad's mom. She would take me every Saturday, I think, or Sunday evening, and we would walk when the bridge first got put there. We would walk from Mother's house all that way and across the bridge to Gerald Whitehorse's house for his wife to give me piano lessons.
At the Straits.
At Straits.
Mm-hmm.
And after you got off the bridge, that was a long, long way.
Mm-hmm.
But we did it every Sunday. 8 years, I learned how to play chopsticks.
You sound like me.
That mother would be to grandmother's, and so after school we'd go down there where the post office was. That was where grandmother's house was. And we would play on the dock and things like that we couldn't do where we lived because the landing was kind of far from.
Mm-hmm.
But we'd go swimming and play on the net spreads. And, of course, we had to walk home from school every other day because the school bus would be broken down.
And the school was where it is today?
No.
It was across the street?
The school, where's the road? The cemetery's there. The school is right here.
Okay, so almost close to where the Methodist church?
Where the Methodist church is. Where the parking lot is, there was the parsonage. And see, they used 2 of the classrooms there for school. I went 1 year over there.
Oh, okay.
But where the school was is, do you know where that new Lighthouse Chapel is?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was a school ground. And so almost, and the teacherage is where the Methodist parking lot is.
Okay.
And then the school was next to it. That we would walk to her house, and a lot of times we walked home along the shore, and it was so dark you couldn't see anything. And I remember one evening my oldest brother had bought a little boat from somebody, and we all got in that little boat, and we poled home, not knowing where the boats were and all that kind of stuff.
Wow. Instinct.
Yeah.
Did you ever go over to Browns Island?
Never been there. Never been around it. Never seen it. I've always wanted to, and my Wendy that lives in Marshallboro, we'll go down. Sometimes I'll go and we'll ride down to the end where her husband's boat is, and I'll look over there, and that like was off limits to us. That belonged to the Brown, and you didn't go in that area because you'd be shot.
Okay.
I mean, that's what we were all.
Oh yeah. Well, children, yeah, sure.
So,
and did you ever hear about any Indian trails that were on Harkers Island?
No, but they always said that where Seaside is. When I was little, growing up, that was the prettiest place you have ever seen. There was nothing but big white sand hills. I mean, big hills. Well, it stayed that way. We would go out there weekends and play on the hills, and we would have such good time. There's no such thing as four-wheelers and stuff like that. But it stayed that way until R.L. Moore moved from Raleigh here, and then he bought all that property up and tore it up. But anyway, it was beautiful out there. And I didn't know when, from the shore, almost to the end of the point on the shore was like you walk through the back road. Let's see up here where the creek is.
There's Johns Creek there.
There, well,
Mrs. Brooks.
This way is where the big houses are now.
Mm-hmm.
I guess this would be houses. That's the water, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Seaside would be where? Where's the sand hole?
Seaside would be right in here somewhere, wouldn't it?
So all of this would have been... All of that would be the sand holes, would it not? Sand hills, because it was big. It was almost from the highway right on to where we call it Myrtle's Church.
Uh-huh.
But all of that was woods. Where grandmother lived.
Mm-hmm. She
She lived down that road over here, somewhere. But there was an area there when the housing stopped, the last house that was built there. It was like a tunnel. The trees would be hanging over. But it was like you drive a car. You could have driven a bus through there. And it would go around to the shore. And I often wondered, when I was growing up, grandmother would go there huckleberrying or blueberrying, whatever, and I'd go with her sometimes. But one day I had a hold of her hand. We were walking, and I said, "Grandmother," or Mama, I called her. I said, What is this? It looks like a trail." She said, "That is where the ox and carts went." she said, I don't know that there's many people that realize that the mortar that was made for Fort Macon, the sand came from our sand hole. This path is where the oxen went to the sand hole, got the sand, and carried it back to the shore for the, whatever they call it.
Put it on the barge? Or?
Put it on the barge to take it to Fort Macon.
How about that?
I said, and that, I told a man when we were to Carteret Tech or something, and they had a big thing out there, and I hate it. But you know, a lot of times you tell things, people say that's not the way it was, you know. But they had a big layout, maps and everything of Fort Macon, and I walked up to the table because you had to pay or give a donation or whatever. And I was just talking to the young couple that was there, and I mentioned, I said, you know, the mortar that was made for Fort Macon came from our little island. She said, where's that? I said, Harkers Island. I said, they had to bring it on boats or barges across the... She said, well, let's not talk about that. I mean, she was so rude, she and the boy. I said, I want to pop you. So history, that's what I'm saying about this place. Now people ask me, and I didn't realize the importance of this place until... But I tell people now, I told people at Seaside this morning, I'm going to take Lynn to work. I told Mila, I said, yes, Peyton has been down there with her school class. But Peyton has not learned. She has not studied. She's not had anybody walking around and taking time to explain things. Mm-hmm. These children come with groups and they're in such a hurry. I don't think they get the full impact. But I think what a great place this is if it stays this way.
Right, right.
For those children that they'll never know. Mm-hmm. One of the guys that was in there, he said, well, I can't remember what he said he brought down here. But I was telling him about how many people that have been here since I've been here from other countries. I said, and the locals will take advantage of it, and it's right down our back door. I said, they'd better pay attention to it. Even the older ones have not seen, don't know what some things are that's here. So you know the younger ones, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, get back to you. I had a tendency to drift off.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I really appreciate your time today, and I'm hoping that you'll let me copy some of those pictures that you.
I will bring that down here. I started with a picture that a friend of mine took of Daddy at a park when they were in Daytona, when they lived down there for a little bit, and then I started from his birth certificate. I've got copies of everything. Now, there's some people, when you do genealogy, some people don't realize that. My oldest brother died in Wilmington at Seabury's Hospital with meningitis when he was 13. When I was getting in genealogy, and my husband's father died in Wilmington, Seabury's Hospital. But they don't realize that if you want to keep those, if you want anybody, your great-great-grandchildren, if they ever want to say, where is it? You've got to have copies. So I always send or go to the hospital where they were born or died and get records and bring them home. And I've got everything in that album that's about that thick. Mm-hmm. I started with Daddy's life until his death certificate. Then I started with Mother and her life. Then I started each one of the children and their lives, their children, all that stuff. So it's a big album. But at least I've got it. The only thing is the house burns down.
Oh, dear. Well, now, you are Mormon by faith.
Yeah.
Now, how many generations of Mormon are you? Were your mom and dad Mormon? Or?
Daddy's family had always, his dad, his mother never did join the church, even though she believed in our doctrine. That because all of her family were of another faith, she didn't want to hurt them, you know. My granddaddy, his house was on Shackelford Banks, and the first missionaries that came, his house was the first one they stayed to. Mm-hmm. And I wondered the most, and I wanted to talk to Daddy. There's so much. I thought Mother and Daddy were going to live forever.
Oh, no.
I wanted to say, Daddy, everybody probably had a little 2-room shack where they ate and sat and told stories and did everything, and the room where they slept. I went and say, Daddy, did they have to sleep on the floor? And a lot of the houses didn't even have floors.
Mm.
They had seaweed or whatever to sleep on. Then when they moved over here, he tore the porch apart one time to make seats for the people to have outdoor meetings because our church had been burned, so they would go to each other's houses. He was a real strong. When the missionaries were run off the island, they were going to be run in the water to drown. He was fishing and saw what was happening and came ashore and got them out of the water and took them into Beaufort. He was a real strong man. Mm. But then, but he went, there's so much I want to tell you, but...
Well, I'll tell you what, we've done a lot today. Can we make an appointment next week sometime and do it again?
I'd love to. I wish I had the sense or the ability to sit down and write all this stuff and just hand it to you and say, here it is.
Well, no, that's okay.
But I was thinking about the school building. See, the school building used to be across from where the schoolhouse is now. Mm-hmm. They had to walk through the marshes because Daddy's mother and her family grew up where Tom Sparks' house is, so they had to walk through the marshes to get to that school. And he said that he'd catch a soft crab going home that evening and put it under his hat. It's up behind the water, we run down it. But it was hard. But they were enjoying life so much that it didn't matter because everybody fared alike. You didn't have more than I had. You didn't have air conditioner, but why? If I didn't have one, I was just like
everybody was equal.
Yep.
Everybody was equal.
And I think a lot of people, well, I have heard the older people say how when a person died or got really sick, people went and took care of them. And they sat up the night of the funeral. They didn't leave them at the church.
Sitting up with the dead.
Sat up with the dead.
Yeah.
Care how hot it was, they did it.
Yeah.
And they didn't have picnics to eat while the person was laying there dead either. People were so more sensitive to other people, I think, at that time.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and we'll do this again real soon. Thank you, Miss Mattie. I appreciate
I'll
it.
try to remember. I'll get that book out and see if I need any catching up to do.
All right. Talk with you later.
Thank you for joining us again to The Landing. This podcast is brought to you by the Coors Sound Waterfowl Museum and Heritage Center. I am your host, Stacy Davis Baisden, and today's podcast was produced by April Davidson. Tune in next week as we continue spotlighting oral histories. Until then, stay safe and be kind.